when a simple woman faced cruel humiliation at a bank. Little did anyone know that her billionaire husband's quiet power would spark a movement that changed lives forever. Mira woke up early that morning like she always did. The sun had just started to rise, and a soft golden light was slowly spreading through the windows of her small but tidy apartment. She quietly folded her blanket, took a deep breath, and smiled. Today was important to her. After many months of saving every little rupee from her household expenses and the small income she earned from selling handmade bags online, she had finally collected 2 lakh. She had kept it carefully in a tin box hidden behind the old books on her shelf. The money meant a lot to her. It was not just savings. It was proof of her hard work, her discipline, and her self-respect. She had always believed in living simply. Her clothes were plain, her jewelry was minimal, and she never showed off anything. People often thought she was just a regular housewife, someone who depended on her husband for everything. But she knew better. She was strong in her own way. She managed her home beautifully, handled money wisely, and never asked for anything for herself. And today, she wanted to take one more small step on her own. She wanted to deposit the money into a fixed deposit account so that it could grow and help her in the future. After preparing a simple breakfast and leaving lunch ready for her husband Arav, she got ready. She wore a plain beige cotton sari with a faded red border. She tied her hair back in a bun and picked up her cloth purse, which had the cash carefully counted and wrapped. Her husband had offered to come with her, but she had politely refused. She didn't want to bother him for such a small thing. It was just a bank deposit after all. As she entered the bank, she felt a strange nervousness. The branch was large, modern, and full of people. The security guard at the entrance gave her a quick look but didn't greet her. She smiled at him anyway and walked inside. The air was cool, and the glass walls made the place feel grand. She looked around for the inquiry desk. There were chairs with wealthy-looking customers waiting. Some wore branded clothes, some had gold watches, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. She quietly walked to the desk and said, "Namaste, Mudge's fixed deposit Karwana High." The young woman at the desk looked at her clothes, her simple purse, and then gave a tight smile. "Tokan Laligio wait Kiji," she said shortly without making eye contact. Mira took the token and sat down in the waiting area. As she waited, she noticed the staff whispering and laughing at the counters. A few of them looked at her and then looked away. One even smirked. She didn't understand why, but she could sense something. She clutched her purse a little tighter. The token number was moving slowly, and she sat there for more than an hour. People who came after her were being called before her. She quietly walked to the desk again and asked politely, "Mara number, Abitak, Qan, Nahia." The same woman replied sharply, "Op wait Karina, Bahut busy high sab." Mira nodded and went back to her seat. The minutes felt like hours. She was beginning to feel invisible. Her back hurt and her throat was dry, but she didn't complain. She reminded herself that once the money was deposited, everything would feel better. Finally, her token number was called. She stood up, smoothed her sari, and walked to the counter. The man behind the counter looked up briefly, then went back to typing. She greeted him gently. "Namaste. Mujethia pays fixed deposit main doll high." She opened her cloth purse and took out the carefully wrapped bundles of notes. The man's expression changed. He looked at the cash and then at her eyebrows. Raised. "Ya pays kahan se layap?" he asked sharply. Mira was surprised by the question. "Main thoda kark bashe. Or kutch handmade bags bekti hoon online," she said, trying to explain calmly. The man didn't believe her ID Dekai. "Bankard. Adar? Bank main kitna balance high abi? AIPQ nam pay? Or kaya accounts high?" His tone was not just strict, it was suspicious and rude. Mira handed over her Adar card and PAN card, but it seemed like he wasn't satisfied. He called another employee, whispered something, and both of them began to discuss her in front of her, pointing at her notes and making faces. One of them laughed and said, "Lagdahai kisi," or Kapisahai. "Shayad garse, Nikal kai, lehungi." Mira's face turned red.
Nothing, not from anger, but from deep shame.
No one had spoken to her like this before. She wasn't a criminal. She hadn't done anything wrong. And yet, they were treating her as if she had come with black money or something stolen. She tried to speak again. Yeah, Pisa Marahai. Main surf deposit Karna Chati Hoon. The man shook his head. Opco FD Nahi Mil Shakta Bina Proof K. Cash deposit limit be high. Opco Yahan FD Nahi Miliga. Please line say Hachai. Mira stood frozen. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. The money she had saved with so much care was now being questioned. No one even cared to ask her name or look properly at her documents. They just assumed she was someone not worth helping. A small group of customers had started watching. The security guard walked closer, as if preparing to escort her out. The employees went back to their screens, ignoring her. Mira slowly gathered the notes, placed them back in her purse, stepped away from the counter. She walked out of the bank, her eyes full but not yet crying. On the street the sun was bright, and people walked past her without noticing anything. But inside she felt something break. It wasn't just about the deposit. It was about how people had made her feel, as if she didn't belong there. As if her simplicity was a reason for shame, she had never asked for respect from anyone. But today, she realized how quickly the world judged people by their clothes, their speech, and their appearance. She walked slowly towards the auto stand, still holding her purse tightly. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached home, she didn't say anything at first. She quietly placed the purse back in its hiding place. Then she went into the kitchen and started making tea. Araf, her husband, noticed the sadness in her eyes. He sat beside her at the dining table and asked gently, Sabthi kai na Mira? Looked at him, her eyes finally letting go of the tears. Bang manne, mujhe fd karnanahi dia. Bola, main kon hoon, pays kahasele, yasab pucha. Or sabek salm mudge. She paused, unable to finish. Arav listened quietly. He didn't speak right away. He reached across the table and held her hand. There was no anger in his eyes, just a quiet fire beginning to rise. He wasn't just listening to a story, he was absorbing every insult she had faced, every humiliation she had suffered in silence. Mira, still not knowing what was about to happen, wiped her tears and tried to smile. Koi bat nahi, todi si bat thi, she said, but Arav knew better. This wasn't a small matter. This was about dignity, about respect. And Mira, the woman who never asked for anything, who never demanded any credit, had just been wronged in a way he couldn't ignore. She didn't know it yet. But what had happened that morning in the bank was about to turn into something far bigger. Something that would not just change the lives of the people in that branch, but send a message across the entire country. The next morning, Mira woke up early again, just like she always did. But something inside her felt different. Even though the sunlight was warm and the room was peaceful, her heart was still carrying the weight of yesterday. She tried to brush. It often continued with her routine, folding the bedsheet, boiling the milk, and preparing breakfast. But the words and looks from the bank staff still echoed in her mind. The way they had treated her as if she didn't belong there, as if her money had no value, as if she had done something wrong, kept hurting her quietly. She didn't speak much that morning. Even when Arav sat at the table and asked how she slept, she just nodded with a half smile and served him tea. Arav, however, was watching her closely. He was a calm man by nature. He never raised his voice, never showed anger, and never used his position to dominate anyone. But inside him was a deep sense of justice, especially for those who couldn't fight for themselves. He couldn't forget the sadness in Mira's voice the night before. He had never seen her so upset. She had always been the strong one, the quiet supporter who never asked for anything. Seeing her heart broken like that had disturbed him more than he had expected. While Mira went into the kitchen to make lunch, Arav picked up his phone. He didn't tell her anything, but he made a few short calls. He didn't shout or argue. He only said things once, and those who received his calls understood the seriousness of his tone. One of the calls went to the regional head of the very bank where Mira had been insulted. Another call went to a journalist friend just to inform. Not to complain. Arav didn't believe in threats. He believed in action. Meanwhile, Mira was still trying to convince herself that it wasn't such a big deal. She thought maybe she had looked too simple. Maybe her sari was too faded. Maybe her old purse had made people judge her. She was trying to blame herself for their rudeness, even though deep inside she knew she had done nothing wrong. Followed all the rules, she had brought her ID proofs. She had spoken respectfully, but still they had dismissed her like she didn't matter. She remembered how the bank official had looked at her money and asked her, "Ya pisa kahanse layop?" The question had cut her like a knife. It wasn't just a question. It was a way of telling her, "You don't look like someone who can earn this much." "You don't belong here after lunch?" Mira tried to keep herself busy. She started stitching a bag order for one of her regular customers. Her hands moved with the needle, but her mind kept wandering. She thought of how the guard at the door had looked through her, how the woman at the inquiry desk had spoken without respect, how the counter staff had laughed as if she was a joke. For the first time in a long while, she felt small, invisible. Later that afternoon, Arav came to her and said, "Mira, cello thoda bahar, cheltain." She looked surprised. He usually didn't ask her to go out on weekdays, especially not. In the middle of the afternoon, she asked softly Kahan. He smiled and replied, "Wahin, Jahan, Kalgi, Thi." She looked at him, confused. "Wapa's bank?" she asked. He nodded. "Han Buschala Mirsoth." Mira hesitated. "Parkun, Wahanya Kia Karinj. Unlogin ni already manakar dia. Mujwapas wahi sabsuna nahi hai." Arav looked into her eyes. "Mainhun na, bus chelo." She didn't argue. Something in his voice was calm, but strong. She quietly changed into another simple sari, tied her hair again, picked up her cloth purse, and followed him. Arav wore his usual white kurta pajama. He looked like any ordinary man, but there was a quiet power in the way he carried himself. As they entered the bank, things felt different. The same security guard at the entrance stood up straighter. He looked nervous, unsure. Mira noticed the change but didn't understand it. She thought maybe he had recognized her from yesterday and was feeling guilty. Inside the bank, the same counters were working, and the same staff were sitting. But the moment they saw Arav walk in, something changed in the air. One of the senior staff looked up, his face turning pale. He quickly whispered something to a colleague and picked up the phone. Just a few minutes later, a well-dressed man in a black suit came rushing in. He looked around the room as if searching for someone. Then his eyes landed on Arav, and his expression changed from confusion to panic. He walked straight to Arav with folded hands and said, "Sir, op, Yumina nahi, pata tha, op, ayer, rehi hain, please. Ander cheli, Bathai." Mira was shocked. She looked at Arav, then at the man. She couldn't understand what was happening. Why was this man treating Arav with so much respect? Who was he? Arav didn't move. He stood there calmly and said, "Mujbathna nahi hai, mujbus apni patni ke, sathek sawal, puchna hai." Then he turned toward the counter and pointed at the same man who had insulted Mira the day before. "Yeah, admi haina jin hon. Cal in a fixed deposit, karn se roka?" The staff member stood up, his hand shaking. "Sir, Kalthoda, misunderstanding hogaya tha." Main Arav interrupted, his voice still calm. "Kia USS misunderstanding, kilai apnamafi monji." The man went silent. Everyone in the bank had stopped working now. The entire branch was watching. Arav continued, "Mary Patney, Yahan, FD Karn, Ethi. Uskpaz, valid ID Thi, pays the hard document the Fearby OP logon, ni use respect nahidia. OP logon ni use, Islai reject, Kardia kunki, Uska kapta, simple tha, Uska purse, Purana tha, Apko, Laga ye, Pisa, Iskaho, Hainahi, Shakta. No one spoke. The man in the black suit tried to smile and said, "Sir, please Opiander Chali. Hum Sab, clear car denj." Arav turned to Mira and softly said, Abadao, Mira, Tum Yahan, FD, Karna Chatiho. Mira didn't speak. Her throat felt dry. She could only nod slowly. Arav looked back at the senior staff. AB, FD, Hoga. Sorry, documents. Joe, Cal rejects Kige. The AB, check Caro. The staff rushed to follow instructions. They took the papers, counted the cash, and completed the entire process within minutes. The same people who had laughed at Mira yesterday now spoke with extra respect, even fear. They avoided eye contact and whispered apologies. Arav didn't smile. He didn't look angry either. He only looked serious, focused. After the process was done, Arav turned toward the man in the black suit. Main apney, Sabi accounts, mutual. Funds or investments, Yahan, say withdraw kar rahahun. Opki branch main, Jolog Comcart Hain, Unko training, Kiza root. Hi. Respect or professionalism, Kanampe Yajo drama Yahan Hota Hai, Menuska Hisanahi Benachata. The man looked shocked. Sir, please Aizamat Kiji. Aphumare biggest investors main say Yakane. Gah. Arav simply replied, main sobs. Pahol ek pati hoon. Or Manus and San Ko support Kardahoon Gies, Oplog and Nikal Nietzsche Dekaya. With that, he took Mira's hand and walked out. The staff and customers inside the bank just stood silently, watching them go. Outside, Mira was still trying to understand everything. She finally asked Arav, Yeah, Sob. Tumkon Ho. Unlogin Nitums, Itna Dart Kyun. The Arav looked at her with a soft smile. Main Wahi, Hoon Jo Tumher Lai Hoon. Bus Baki Dunia, Kalai, Thoda Alag Hoon. She didn't ask more. Yet, something inside her felt lighter, not because of revenge, but because someone had stood up for her. It's not with anger, but with quiet strength. It wasn't just about a fixed deposit anymore. It was about her voice being heard, her dignity being restored, and though she had walked into the bank as a simple woman once again, this time the world around her had changed, and it had seen her not just as someone's wife, not as someone in a faded sari, but as someone who deserved respect, just like anyone else. Mira didn't speak much on the way home. Her mind was filled with questions and emotions she couldn't name. What had just happened? How did the same bank where she had been humiliated just a day before suddenly treat her with so much respect? Why had the bank manager, the staff, even the security guard all suddenly changed their behavior as soon as Arav had stepped inside? And most importantly, who was her husband, really? She looked at him quietly while they sat in the auto. Expression was calm, just like always. But Mira had started noticing things she hadn't noticed before. The way the bank manager had called him sir with folded hands. The way people stepped aside when he walked. The way even the highest-ranking officer there looked nervous in his presence. Something wasn't adding up when they reached home. Arav removed his slippers and went straight to wash his hands. He looked relaxed. Mira served him a glass of water and sat across from him, still silent. Arav noticed her expression and said, Tumhar mon main kuchhai pooch lo. She hesitated. Then finally asked in a soft voice, Tumho Khan, Arav, main tump, Jontahoon, par, Ajlag, Raha, Hai main, Tumho, Hai main, Tumho, Pori, Taranahi, Jonti. Arav smiled gently. Main Wahihoon, Jo Tumhar, Soth Subachai, Pitahoon, Jo Tumhari, Hothanka, Parat Sobs, Ziada Passand, Kardahoon, Jo Tumshar, Botshare Kardahoon. He paused for a second. Parhan, Dunya, Kuye, Lai Main, Kutcher B. Hoon. She looked at him, waiting. He continued, Mainek Business Group Kie owner, Hoon, Mira. Jo Bank Jahan Tum Kalgaye, the U.S. Bank Kie headquarters Main Mir Coffee Investments Hain. Real estate, pharmaceuticals, export-import, Sab Main Mara, Hissa. Hi, Leakin Main Kabi, Show Off Nahi Kia, Islai Tum Kabi, Bataya Nahi. Mira sat stunned. Harav? A billionaire? It seemed unreal. He had never shown off, never bought fancy cars, never even wore expensive clothes. He used to leave the house in simple cotton shirts and always took care of little expenses with so much thoughtfulness. How could someone like him be so rich and powerful? She asked slowly. Partam mudj, kyu nahi bataya, autamha, pa, sabkuch hai, furbi, hum, itni, simple zindagi ji rehi. The Arav looked into her eyes. Kunki tum woho gisk lai pisakabi seb kuch nahi tha. Tum kavi manji nahi. Tum kavi complained nahi kia. Tumhara? Pia bina shardan katha. Main nahi, chata, taki, pisa, humari beach kabi, rishtmain, badlovle. Tears welled up in Mira's eyes, not because she was sad, but because she was overwhelmed. All these years she had lived believing she was just an ordinary woman, married to an ordinary man. But she realized now that the life she had been given was far from ordinary. And more than the money, she was touched by Arif's reason. He had hidden his wealth not out of fear, but out of love. He didn't want money to define their relationship. She said quietly, Parta Mariazet, ki layetna sabkia, mazapkia, U.S. Bank main sabek, sam tamara saftia. Arv nodded. Tam Mary patniho. Tam Mary is at ho. Gemain tamhar soth. Nakata hota tomuj apni apse sharam ati. That evening, Mira walked into the kitchen with a light heart. She cooked dinner with more care than usual. Every ingredient felt more meaningful. She wasn't cooking just for her husband anymore. She was cooking for a man who had silently carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders and still chosen to keep life simple for her. She felt a new respect for him and also for herself. She wasn't just a simple woman. She was the strength behind someone powerful, and that too without even realizing it. Over the next few days, word spread about what had happened at the bank. The story had leaked out not because Arov had publicized it, but because someone in the bank had shared it with a local reporter. The story was picked up by online news portals and social media platforms. The headline was simple but strong. A humble woman faces humiliation at bank until her billionaire husband steps in. People across the country began reading the story, and he praised Arov's quiet support. But more than that, people admired Mira. They saw in her a reflection of many women simple, hardworking, honest who never showed off. Who managed homes, saved money secretly, and supported their families silently. Mira's story resonated with thousands. Comments poured in from women who said they felt seen and heard through her story. One day, Mira received a message on her phone from a women's magazine who wanted to feature her in their next edition. She laughed when she read it. Much. Par article? Main Kia Balongi? She said to Arav, but he looked at her proudly and said, Tum hadi kahani bolti hai. Tum kuchbi nabolo log sunenj. Soon after, the bank that had insulted her issued a public apology. They mentioned that the staff responsible had been suspended and that customer service training would be improved across branches. Mira felt no joy in their punishment. She didn't want revenge. She only wanted respect, and now that she had it, she didn't care about the rest. As more people reached out to her, asking for interviews or comments, Mira stayed away from the spotlight. She didn't want fame. She still wore her same cotton saris, still stitched bags in her free time, still cooked food with the same love. Nothing had changed outside, but something had definitely changed inside. She felt stronger now. Into markets with her head held higher, she spoke with more confidence, and she no longer felt guilty for carrying cash or asking questions. She had been silenced once, but now her voice had become a symbol for many others. One evening while sitting on the terrace, Arav brought her a cup of tea. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange. He sat beside her and said, Tamujia delia kiazli takat kia hote hai. Na pisa, na position, sli takat, hati hai is it Dina or Lena? Ah! She looked at him and smiled. Or is it Captain say nahi hoti? Dil say hoti hai? That night as they lay in bed, Mira closed her eyes and thought about the past week. Just a few days ago, she had walked into a bank as an invisible woman. Now she felt visible, not because of her husband's wealth, but because of her own worth. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed that even a simple woman, with no makeup, no jewels, and no fancy clothes, could be strong, powerful, and deeply respected. The journey wasn't over. But now she knew that wherever she walked, she would never walk small again. It's not because of the world, but because she had seen her true value, and so had everyone else. That week brought many changes in Mira's life, though from the outside, it all still looked simple. The house remained the same, modest, clean, full of the same warmth and quiet. Her clothes were still the same soft cotton saris. The kitchen had the same familiar smells of masalas, rice, and freshly made rotis, but inside Mira's heart, something deep had shifted. She was no longer carrying the quiet fear that had lived inside her for so long, the fear of being dismissed, ignored, or insulted just because she looked simple. Since the bank incident, she had gained not just her dignity back, but something even more important: confidence. For the first time, she had seen how quickly the world judged people by appearance. And for the first time, she had also seen what it looked like when someone stood up against that. Arav had defended her without shouting or violence. He hadn't used power to scare, but to bring back the respect that was stolen from her. Mira now realized something very clearly. Respect was not something to be begged for. It was something that people deserved just for being human. Whether a woman wore silk or cotton, drove a car or took a rickshaw, spoke fluent English or simple Hindi, none of it should decide her worth. But sadly, it often did. One afternoon, a group of women from her neighborhood came to visit. These were the same women who had once said things like, "Mira tu buskar ka kam main hai lagi ready hai," or "Usk kapt hamisha simple hot hain." But now they sat in her house smiling and asking questions. "Mira, humnan tomhar bori main article pada, itni body bat ho gi, or tum kuch batati binahi ho," said one of them. Another one added, "Tumhar husband ki bari main kabiendaza hai nahi hua, in bad admi hain." Mira smiled politely but didn't boast. She served them tea, just like she always did. She replied, "Whoa, bad surf dunya ki lai hain, mir lai to ways high. Hain highs payhall." The women kept asking questions about the bank, the article, the apology, but Mira's focus was somewhere else. As she poured tea and offered biscuits, she noticed something new. These women, who used to look down on her for being too plain, were now watching her with respect. But it wasn't because she had changed. It was because they had finally seen her worth. And that made her feel something powerful. She didn't need to change for the world had to change the way it looked at women like her. Later that evening, Arv came home early and found Mira quietly stitching her bags, like always. He watched her for a while and then said, "Tum socha, kuchkarn kamira, apni kahani sunain ka." She looked up. "Main, kakar shakti hun." "Bahut," Kuch Araf replied. "Tum her highs hazaran, oratine hain, joraz, choti choti, bazadi jelti hain, buses sly kunki, wo, fashionable nahi hain, yapaisa, unki jeb main, nahi dikta, tum unki awaz ban, shakti ho." Mira was quiet for a long time. She was still that same woman who avoided attention, who found comfort in corners and simplicity. But somewhere inside her, Arab's words planted a small seed. A few days later, something unexpected happened. A young girl named Nisha, who lived in the nearby colony, knocked on Mira's door. She looked nervous, her eyes full of hesitation. Mira welcomed her in and offered her water. Nisha said, "Auntie, main opki story potty thi Facebook pay. Muj kuchbat karni thi." Mira smiled. Han beta bolo. Nisha shared how she had been trying to start a small business, handmade jewelry, but every time she went to a bank or a shop to discuss her ideas, she was laughed at. People didn't take her seriously because she was young, wore simple clothes, and came from a lower middle-class family. Wo log mujadek ke, hiket hain, payhole, apnigar, ko samalo, business bod, main Carlina, she said, her voice shaky. Mira listened carefully. She saw herself in Nisha. Same self-doubt, the same pain of being treated as less than. She held Nisha's hand and said gently, Main tum hari madad, karungi. Milk tum hara, kam sharu, karinj. That day was the beginning of something new. Mira began mentoring Nisha not as a teacher, but as someone who understood. Her set up a small social media page, taught her how to talk to customers, and even stitched small pouches for the jewelry packaging. Slowly, Nisha gained confidence. She began making sales. Her smile returned. This small act made Mira feel something she had never felt before, a sense of purpose beyond her home. One girl had come forward, but how many more were out there, waiting quietly, crushed under judgment, just like she had been? With Arav's help, Mira decided to take a bold step. She started a small community group called Saman Ki Awaza, name that meant the voice of respect. It wasn't registered or funded. It was just a simple WhatsApp group at first. Mira added women she knew, neighbors, local vendors, wives, tailors, maids, and even college girls. She invited them to share stories of moments when they had been made to feel less, when they had been looked down on, or disrespected because of how they looked or what they wore. At first, only a few women spoke. But slowly, the group grew. Stories began pouring in. A woman shared how she had been denied a job because her English wasn't good. Another shared how a clothing shop owner had insulted her for asking the price of a lehenga she obviously couldn't afford. A college girl shared how her teacher had told her to dress better if she wanted to be taken seriously. Each story hit Mira's heart like a wave. These weren't rich or famous women. These were women like her, simple, decent, full of courage, but often silenced. They had just needed one person to listen. Mira didn't try to fix their lives. She just listened, replied with warmth, and told them, Tum galat, nahi ho. Anki so galat, hi. And those simple words gave strength. Arav watched all this silently. He never interfered, never tried to lead. He just made sure Mira had the time, space, and tools to keep going. Sometimes he would say, Tum harphone, main kia, chal raha, hayaj. And Mira would smile and say, Ika, or kahani, e hai. Or a kud, pay barosa, karna, shuru, kia, hai. One day, a local college invited Mira to speak at a women's seminar. She panicked. Main kia balangi in laganke, psalm. She asked Arav. He looked at her and said, Wahi bolo jo tum filkia, wahi bolo jo tum ho. Mira stood on that college stage wearing her regular cotton sari, no makeup, and trembling hands. But when she started speaking, her voice became steady. She told them her story not as a victim, but as someone who had discovered her worth. She told them that simplicity wasn't weakness, and respect wasn't a gift to be earned through appearance or status. It was a right. The hall echoed with applause. Some girls had tears in their eyes. And Mira knew, at that moment, that she had become more than a story. She had become a movement. Months passed. The group Saman Kiawa slowly turned into a physical meeting circle. Every Sunday, women came together in Mira's small house. They drank chai, shared stories, encouraged each other's small businesses, and celebrated tiny wins like opening a bank account or learning how to use a smartphone. And Mira, she remained the same. She still stitched bags, still made Aro's favorite doll, still folded clothes with care. But now, she also folded letters of encouragement, stitched self-worth into every word she spoke, and carried pride in every wrinkle of her sari. She had not become someone else. She had just become more of herself, and all of it had started with a visit to a bank with a few cruel words. With one silent man standing up beside her, not with loudness, but with quiet power. That one moment of pain had bloomed into a life filled with strength, not just for her, but for many others. And so, Mira walked forward, not just as a simple woman, but as a leader, a guide, and a quiet warrior for dignity. The months that followed marked a new chapter in Mira's life, one that was filled with purpose, courage, and a deep sense of fulfillment. Though everything around her seemed unchanged, the same modest house, the same familiar routines, inside her heart, a powerful transformation had taken place. Mira was no longer the timid, quiet woman who once accepted humiliation as a part of life. She was now a symbol of hope and strength for many, a leader whose voice carried far beyond the walls of her home. After her powerful speech at the college and the growing success of Mira's life became busier but richer. Women's group grew from just a handful of members to a large community that connected through meetings, online chats, and social gatherings. Every woman who joined brought her own story, her own struggles, and her own dreams. Together, they formed a sisterhood built on respect, encouragement, and shared experiences. Mira discovered the true power of listening. She would sit patiently for hours as women came to her with their problems, stories of discrimination at work, difficulties managing families, struggles to access education, or even just the silent battles fought daily against self-doubt. With every story, Mira's heart grew more open, her resolve stronger. She became a guide, not by preaching, but by sharing what she had learned through her own journey. One day, a woman named Rekha came to Mira with a trembling voice, where she was a widow, living with 2 children, struggling to make ends meet. She wanted to start tailoring classes for other women in the village, but didn't know how to begin. Mira welcomed her warmly, helped her organize a small workspace in her own home, and connected her with local resources. Rekha's tailoring classes soon became popular, providing skills and income to many women who had nowhere else to turn. Mira felt immense pride watching Rekha teach and empower others. It was a small victory, but a shining one. At the same time, Arav remained a steady support in the background. He never tried to overshadow Mira or take credit for her work. Instead, he made sure she had the freedom and confidence to grow on her own terms. Sometimes, he would quietly arrange meetings or contacts to help the women's group access funding or legal advice. Other times, he would simply listen to Mira's daily stories, his eyes reflecting pride and admiration. Though Mira's life was now more public, she stayed grounded in her simplicity. She continued her daily chores, stitched bags to sell at local markets, and cooked meals with the same love as before. The fame never changed her. She believed her strength came from being authentic and true to herself. She often reminded the women in her group, "We don't need to pretend to be someone else to be worthy. Our power lies in being ourselves." Impact of Saman Kiawaz extended beyond just personal stories and empowerment. Mira and her group started campaigns to raise awareness about women's rights, access to education, and healthcare. They organized workshops on financial literacy, teaching women how to save money, manage budgets, and start small businesses. Slowly but surely, the community began to change. Banks, which once humiliated women like Mira, were now being challenged. The women learned to demand respect, ask questions, and assert their rights. Some local bank managers who had previously been dismissive now approached Mira for advice on improving customer relations. The transformation in the community was slow but visible. Mira also began collaborating with NGOs and local government offices to bring larger resources and support to her village. She was invited to speak at events, conferences, and panels on women's empowerment. Each time she stepped onto a stage or spoke to a crowd, she carried with her the stories of countless women who had trusted her. She spoke not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been silenced. Through it all, Mira's relationship with Arav grew deeper. Their marriage, once quiet and simple, was now filled with shared dreams and mutual respect on a whole new level. Arav admired Mira's courage and leadership, and Mira cherished Roe's unwavering support. They were partners in every sense. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Mira and Arav sat together on their terrace, watching the stars emerge in the dark sky. Mira spoke softly, "Kabi socha nahi faki mainit ni dor. Ah jongi. Jodin main apniap, ko sabs.com, samaj tithi, ushk, safar, socha b, nahi tha." Arav held her hand and smiled. Tum. Wo. Sab kia. Jo harek. Insan karshakta. Hyapni derka. Bachana. Or apuni likud. Katahuna Mira looked up at him, her eyes shining. Ab much lugda, hai ki asli takatsuth. Pisa ya power nahi. Poda ya power nahi. Wo, hoti, hi jazba main, himet main, or isit main. Their story had become an inspiration, not because of wealth or status, but because of the universal truth it represented. Every person deserves respect, every voice matters, and even the simplest among us can create great change. As Mira reflected on her journey, she thought of the woman who had once walked into that bank, feeling small and invisible. That woman had been humiliated and hurt, but she had found strength within herself and through the love of her husband. Together they had turned pain into power and shame into pride. Today, Mira was not just a simple woman, she was a leader, a mentor, and a beacon of hope. She had learned that dignity was not given, it was taken, fought for, and owned. She understood that humility and strength could live together, and that true richness lay in kindness and courage. The village where she lived began to change. Slowly but surely, girls started dreaming bigger. Women spoke louder. Children learned to respect their mothers and sisters, and in the heart of it all was Mira, once invisible, now unforgettable. Her story was a reminder that no matter where one starts, no matter how simple one's life may seem, every person holds the power to change the world around them. It only takes one step, one voice, one act of courage to begin the journey. Mira's journey had taught her that true strength is not in showing off or being rich, but in standing tall with humility, fighting quietly but fiercely for what is right, and lifting others as you climb. And that is how a simple woman, humiliated at a bank, became a symbol of hope and dignity, not just for herself, but for countless others who walked with her on the path of respect and love.